All praise is due to Almighty Allah. May the peace and blessings of Allah be on the last Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. So one of the things that some of us who might have heard me speak or been to my class will find is that I tend to want to move around. So this one is like trying to discipline me to some extent, but inshallah we'll be fine. So I'm pretty excited about today's talk, and as soon as I walked in here, one of the things that I found immediately and I felt was this energy of togetherness, this sense of community. Coupled the fact that, you know, the place is beautiful. I can see the pinks and purples and the diamonds and the tables and the candles. It's very nice. And I like that. I know, I saw that. And I like the fact that, you know, we can come out as women and be in a space like this where we combine some of our essence as beautiful human beings, as people who may respond to some of their femininity, as well as the form that Allah has given them as human beings as well. I like that. And I love that part of what we're doing today is going to be in a space like this, coupled with the food. The food smells so delicious, oh my goodness. Even though I haven't had some, but I've been told that I'll get to take some home. So I like that. So if you look at all of that, what it does is that it creates this space where already, when you come into the space, there's a feeling of being home to some extent. There's a feeling of being received, being welcomed. And what are the things that you use to welcome people? You talk about friendship, you talk about food, you talk about fellowship. And I'm hoping that the more of these programs you run, the more of this feeling we can build. Because at the end of the day, we can have the biggest dreams, we can have the most amazing vision. If we do not have a community of people, if we don't have that togetherness, that support, it's not going to go anywhere. So, which gives me some kind of segue into the topic for today, which is owning your Islam. I found the topic quite intriguing from the moment Sarah told me to when I started thinking about it some more, because I thought, how do you own something that is already with you? So it's a bit of a dilemma when you think about it. And so not to go philosophical or too psychoanalytical in any way, but let's think about it. If we say, for example, I don't know, there's a bag. Who has a bag here? Okay, where's the bag? Okay. So if I asked you, sister, what's the name, please? Okay. If I asked you to give the bag to your sister over there, could you give the bag to her?
My daughter?
Oh, is that your daughter? See? Okay. Don't let us give it to your daughter. I wanted you to give it to someone that is not from the same household I do. So could you give it to maybe the person next to your daughter? Okay. I think you may have seen my notes. So I'd like you to give the bag to her. Okay. But if I asked you, Rachel, does that bag belong to you? Why not?
Because it belongs to someone else. It belongs to my sister.
Oh, she's your sister.
Not my sister, a sister.
Okay.
No, we're all family. We're all family.
I hear you. So the bag doesn't belong to you, but you've been given. And I asked you and you rightly answered, the bag was given to you, but doesn't belong to you. But it's in your hand. If somebody were to just see you holding the bag, they might say, oh, wow, I love your bag. And you can respond with two things. Say, oh, thank you. Or you can say the bag doesn't belong to me, but thank you. Because it doesn't belong to you. So you can give the bag back now. Now, what if you forgot your bag, and you took that bag? Okay. You forgot your bag, and you took the bag home. And assuming you're just strangers on the train, and you just take the bag home, and you put the bag maybe on the shelf somewhere, thinking one day you might run into the stranger because the bag doesn't belong to you. And after a while, what happens to the bag is that you might even remember that you put it there because it's been there for so long and the bag is there. But what if one day, or you took the bag, said, oh, wow, this is a beautiful bag. Finders keepers. I'm just going to use the bag. But you've put your name on the bag. So you're thinking, if I take this bag out and my sister suddenly runs into me, she's going to know that this is her bag. And I'm loving this bag so much, I don't want to give it back. So what you tend to do is that you might avoid the places you might run into her. You might cover up the place where her name is. You might keep it under your arm instead of dangling it.
Move houses.
And move houses, something. And I might be talking about it quite familiarly. I've never taken someone's bag before. So you might do that, but you're using the bag. But every time you look at that bag, you see her name on it. And you say, that bag doesn't belong to you. But anyway, still nice to carry around. And the family won't know anyway. They're just going to think, oh, she's got a lovely tasting bag. But what if you now decided, okay, this bag is a bag with someone else's name. It's not mine. I've been carrying around for so long. They're not likely to find the bag. I'm just going to keep using it. And you make the bag yours. Perhaps what you might then do is to take the bag and, maybe erase the name or just can't be bothered. So that's one thing. But what if I got a lovely bag, said this bag looks like just what will suit Rachel. And I give the bag to you, and it's your bag. And it's a beautiful bag, and I put some beautiful things in it. What is the analogy we're using here? We're not obviously comparing Islam to a bag. But what we're saying is the attitude you have towards something that is given to you but doesn't belong to you is very different from something that is given to you and belongs to you and you own as something that belongs to you. So this is some important distinctions to make. And one thing that is very important is you might think, this sounds like a paradox. Why would you say Islam is something that you have but you don't own, or is given to you but you can't bring yourself to claim it? Then it's a very, very big conversation. So I thought one way to basically try to think about it today is to try and break it down into what it means to say that something is given to you and something is owned by you. So this is how we want to think about it. Now, the first thing I want you to think about is, I don't know, is everyone finished eating or some are still eating? Because I want us to do a quick activity. I think we're good to go? Yeah. All right, so what I'd like you to do, and I'll tell you what will follow afterwards, is just turn to someone beside you. Just turn to someone beside you. And if it's 3 people, that's fine, you can do 3. So you have to actually physically turn to the person. Okay. So once you've turned to the person beside you, I know we've got some young people with us, that's fine too. What I'd like you to do is, I want you to have a quick discussion. I want you to think back, so you take turns. So decide who is A and who is B. A goes first, and then when I say you should switch over, then B takes a turn. Then I'll tell you what you have to do. What I want you to do is, I want you to look at something on the person in front of you and try to think to yourself, if I had, say for example, your hijab on, what would I do with it? Apart from the obvious, like putting on the hijab. What could I do with it? Anything. It could be the scarf. It could even be a smile. It could be the dress. Something. You got to be creative with it as well. But I do want you to, what's something on this person that if I had, this is what I would do with it. So just try and be creative with it. It could be a piece of clothing. It could be a physical attribute. It could be an attitude. Perhaps this is someone you know already or not, or something you can see. So you do need to be looking at the person. And once you've decided what it is, we switch over, the other person does that, then you will talk about it. So it's meant to be a quick exercise, but I do want you to try and put yourself into it. Now, before we do this, there's something I always like to start with, which I didn't this time around. One of the most important things that I always hope for and invite you to do in any talk is that you're here and you've made the intentions to be here. And I want you to make sure that you can connect with that intention and really try to be present as much as you can. So when I ask us to do this kind of exercise, know that it's not just for entertainment. There's a reason for it. So I do want you to see the person in front of you, or if you're three, take turns, just work out who goes first. But I do want everyone to speak. Pick one thing about the other person. I know your mother and daughter. That may actually make it easier or not. So pick something about the other person and think, if I had this, or maybe I already have that. And so seeing it reminds you of what you have. What could I do with it, with this thing? Maybe more of or different, as an example. So let's use me. I've got my very beautiful, if I have to say so myself, my scarf, and the way that I've tied it. And you say, oh, wow, I like her scarf, but if I had it, I'll probably just yank it off something. That's something you could do with it, because you're the one, not me. So this is what we want to do. So go ahead, let's do the activity. It's better you turn and face each other, it's easier.
Sorry, I'm just gonna keep on checking the mic.
That's okay. So just switch to the other person now, please. Or as the case may be, you.
Yeah, you should have gone last.
Like your coat as well, very nice.
Okay, maybe just 10 seconds to finish up. All right, beautiful. Thank you for participating. I really loved seeing how people engaged with it. I think perhaps there are people who already know one another, but there are people who are meeting each other for the first time. So what this does is that it might make you feel uncomfortable that there's some strange person staring at you into your eyes. But that's okay, that discomfort is fine. But what it also does is that it gets you to look at the other person. So let's hear a couple of people and hear how they went. Anybody can go first. And by the way, I say this in a lot of my talks. If you look away, I'm going to call you. Just so you know. But anyway, I'd rather people would volunteer and share what that was like for them and what it was that their time together brought to the surface. Anybody like to go?
Well, I found it very interesting that I'm next to someone who I've known for a long time, and she said something about me that she likes that I would never have guessed about myself. I didn't realise that about me, and I was really quite taken aback.
Wow.
That was a lovely thing to share.
Okay. I guess you know what's happening next. We're going to ask you what she said.
Yeah.
Would you like to share?
I need to get myself a drink. Sorry. I
said that Rachel really displays a confidence. I like the way she is around people, and
Wow.
she can go to a group of people, and the way she talks, she just displays so much confidence about her that I wish that I could having myself.
I
So
love that.
it's lovely.
Thank you. Very good. And what else did you have in your group?
We both felt that Sonia displays a lot of warmth whenever we see her. She has this beautiful warm smile whenever we see her. So
She's very welcoming to people and
Yeah.
people are drawn to her charismatic aura that she has.
Beautiful.
Lovely.
And what did they say about you? Did you
Jenna
get to
is
that?
Always, I find, very reliable, and she's always there. She's always there helping people, always there to, how do I say it? What was I saying? Dependable, a really good friend that you know that no matter what, she will be there and help and do what she can to make things happen. She's, yeah.
That's beautiful.
She goes the extra mile, like really,
Wow.
above and beyond.
I love that. So we found in this group someone who never thought herself as being seen as a person who exudes confidence. We also found a beautiful, beautiful person whose warmth I feel even when she puts things on Facebook.
Yes.
Just beautiful. And everyone feels, well, they said they felt that about you. And we have someone who is described as dependable, someone people can look to and look forward to as being there for them. Look at how beautiful that is. Now, the exercise was for you to also find what it is about this person that you could do something with. And you were saying that that was something you could, you'd love to have. Now, you didn't even know that you were saying it that way. So possibly you couldn't even own it, even though someone saw that about you. So now that you're told, it's possible that you might go back and think about it and say, oh, okay. So I'm a confident person. Is my walk going to change? Am I going to flick my hair back and forth? Because you just did that now. Am I going to, go splurge in the shops and just buy something that I love? But the point is, you're seeing her as having something, but she hadn't up until this moment claimed it as her own, because she didn't even know that was there until somebody else pointed it to her. And I saw Sonia smiling and perhaps feeling a bit embarrassed from what I could read of your body language, that, oh my goodness.
I know I'm crazy.
Yeah? Crazy? Yeah, you could be crazy and lovely. You could be the two. We'll still take that. And the fact that two people are saying it, and I've just said it as well, it's possible that quite a lot of other people as well. And perhaps you know or you don't know that about you, but most of the time we tend to shy away from seeing ourselves in certain ways. And because of that, we miss out on things that have been given to us, but we do not own. We don't claim, we don't own, we don't use, we don't maximize. So one of the reasons why I wanted us to do the exercise. So for everyone who did the exercise, obviously we're not going to go through with everyone, but I'd love to hear one or two more, just because I've been told that we could just do here up until 12 midnight today. So I'm ready for you if you're ready. I can hear some nervous giggles. I'm not sure about that. All right, let's hear one or two more people who'd like to share. One or two more groups who'd like to share. Oh, I think I see somebody raising their hand. No, nobody. It's just my imagination. No one? Oh yeah, thank you. Uh-huh.
So my daughter went first,
Okay.
and she was eyeing my cucumbers, and they're gone now. And I think if I had to choose something, I think I would choose her energy, and she has so much positivity, and like she does not look like what will happen if I do this and that. She doesn't think too much. She just does something, and I tend to overthink and not do anything. So I think I could take a little bit of that.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. And daughter, are you going to share something about mom? No? All right. We'll let you go this time around. But I love what you say about her, because there's another thing that you will find that sometimes we do as parents, which is, well, I'm the mom and I know better, and you're just the daughter, and okay, yeah, well, and that's it. We don't see that person in some of their essence in order to see perhaps there's more to them, their quality. You might talk about them, someone else, when you're talking about children, and sometimes mom gets into this competitive stage. Oh, by the way, my son, cleaned the kitchen yesterday. Oh, yes, he did. Oh, my daughter cleaned the whole house. And there's that competitiveness sometimes. But the issue is that for the most part, we just take some of those things for granted. So to be able to see someone in front of you who is your daughter or your mom or your cousin or somebody that you're just familiar with, and be able to see them and some of who they are, what it does is that, again, you start to see some of what they have. And when you're able to convey that to them, or they convey it to you, it might make you stop and think, oh, okay. Just the same way they might say things that are not particularly nice, they might say things that are nice. And you stop and think, but not necessarily accept it until you test it, or at least try to understand it. Could this be true? And if this is true, what does that mean for me? What tends to happen is when people say things to us, about us, mostly things that are not particularly nice or negative, we're quick to accept that than things that are good and beautiful about us. So if somebody describes us as, oh, that person is very arrogant, and we've heard that, or that person is not a particularly smart person, sometimes, and we hear that often enough, we claim it, we own it as our own, even though it may not be true. So today I thought, if we're talking about owning our Islam, given a bit of the background that I've set with all these examples and the activities we've done, I thought one way to actually start that is by actually thinking about how we're created. So some of us might have heard of the term, the fitra, that Allah gives us. So fitra means the pure nature that Allah has created us with, that essence that we come into the world with. Some old theorists, or some theorists had propositioned before some time ago that, children come into this world as a blank slate. And so whatever happens because of what is happening in the world. And these are the theories that incline towards the nurture approach, that there's nothing a person comes with. A person comes into the world as a blank slate. And so what they become is a function of the world that they're in. And some say, no, it's only nature. You come into the world with certain qualities, and those qualities you have are the things that make you who you are. And there have been a variety of tests and experiments where twins will be separated at birth and will be put in different places, and they will display certain qualities that is basically a function of the qualities that they have in them. And the outcome or the success of their lives will be, oh, well, these are a set of twins that share a whole lot in terms of how they're designed, and yet their lives have turned out differently, even though they're in the same environment. So there are all kinds of scientific research that has been done. The part that concerns us is what Islam tells us, which is the feature of the human being. And that feature, what we're taught is the feature is innately one that is inclined towards God, one that is inclined towards Allah. So there's a natural thread, there's a natural connection that a soul has towards its Lord, towards its creator. And so what that means is, naturally, when a child is born into the world, and this we're told in the Quran, and Prophet Islam has also told us that when a child is born into the world, the child is born in a state of fitra, and that where the child ends up is what eventually makes them into who they are. So what that means is that a person is born with a natural belief in the oneness of God. There's a natural belief in the oneness of God. That's our way. And there are lots of research materials that are backing this, and some of the things you find with children at birth, some of the natural instinctive behaviors that you find with children. There's so much you can get online. And I try not to make my talks too academic, because there's some things that, depending on the professions that you have or what you're studying, you'll be able to tell me quite a bit myself. So, but the part that is relevant to our talk today is the fact that if a person is naturally inclined with a belief, so that belief is there, it's already wired into us. What then happens is we come with the nature, and where we're born into is the nurture. And the nurture is dependent on where we are. So you can have a person who is born into a home that is quite dysfunctional, and there's a whole lot of issues there, abuse, alcohol, all kinds of things are there. Maybe poverty, many things. And this person is in an environment that you would think, oh, well, what do you expect? This is the home this person has come from. So these behaviors are normalized to them. And yet, this person is able to be in that environment and decide, this is not going to be my reality. And they will do everything possible that is in their powers to make sure that they don't end up in with some of the choices or decisions that maybe some family members have made. And they will come out of that place, and we hear all these superstars who will tell you that, oh, I grew up in this neighborhood, this and that, and this is how I turned out. So it's not an automatic science. It's not something that you know for sure that, oh, so if this person is created this way, they must end up that way. It doesn't work out that way. The children of the prophets, prophets of Allah, alayhi salam, that you would think that, oh, well, they're prophets of Allah. Why should their children turn out this way? They turn out in a certain way. So it's not like, do this exact thing and your children are going to be this way. And I'm not a scholar. So some scholars will tell you, okay, perhaps if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is what will happen. We know that there's a dua that we're taught when the husband and wife are meeting and coming together in intimacy, because I'm trying to keep this as PG as possible because of some of the young people here. There's a dua that is made that shaitan should not have any kind of impact on the offspring that will come from that meetup. You see that my mouth is shaking from the meetup. I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to say these days, but anyway, I'm sure you catch my drift. So, but there's no guarantee. You make the dua, but what if Allah tests us with that offspring, with that child? So there are a whole lot of reasons. But the point is, a person is created with that belief, so that's their nature. But what makes them believers is a function of nature and nurture. So nature and nurture is where a person might have certain qualities and behaviors and traits and a whole range of things that they have within them, the culture that is passed on to them, the parents, the way that they see their parents model certain behavior, and they have all those things. And they get to a certain age and they choose to become believers. So there's something that some of us may understand with this. Some of us may have been born into Islam, and some of us may have found Islam, may have reverted to Islam. But what it's really important for us to understand is that just because a person is given Islam doesn't mean they are Muslims, or they are actually believers, believing Muslims. They are Muslim in identity because they're born into Islam and they may identify as Muslims. But when you talk about a believer, someone who worships, who practices, who is conscious in the way they express that belief, that is what you're talking about. That comes from a place of conviction. So one thing that is important that I wanted to try and get us to think about today is what is important about the analogy of the bag and the ownership and the person who is given. How does that relate to what we're saying? And what that means is there's a difference between what you're giving and what you take as your own. There's a difference between the belief that we come into the world with and the belief that we go through the world with. The belief that we live our life with. The belief that we go through the world and interact with others with. And there are several verses of the Quran that talks about how we can understand what that belief is. Now, if you look at that natural inclination I talked about, it's not just to do with the human being. It's to do with the living things. Everything that Allah has created, even our shadows. there's a way our shadow falls prostrate. When we look at the trees, when we look at the way the wind blows, when we look at creation, if we want to talk about the whole concept of the innate belief that we have, the natural inclination, and there are all kinds of videos and supposed miraculous animals that you find all over the internet. Sometimes you might find a fish that has a lao and all sorts of things. I mean, if it works for you, I'm not saying that those things are not possible. I just don't believe that Islam is set up for us to place our trust on miraculous signs for us to accept what Islam is. The most miraculous thing that you can have as a person is just to look within you. That's the most amazing ways that you can't even imagine. A friend of mine, this is many years ago, was having her second baby. And as soon as she called me, and she's this very stoic person, like she just said, oh, I'm going to have a baby. She just gets in there, she has the baby, and she just continues with life. So she calls me, and I, alhamdulillah, get in there just as the baby is born. And the baby is put in my hand. And I'm just bawling my eyes. Oh my God. And she's like, what's wrong with you? They give me the scissors to cut the cut. Oh my God. This is the baby that we've been talking about. We touch a bed and the baby. And I already had my own children. So it's not like it's a new thing to me. But just say, oh wow. This is the life that was in her belly. And the baby is coming and I'm holding him. Like, even talking about it, I'm still getting a bit emotional. Why? It's just the miracle that this is a life that is coming to the world. This is one of the most amazing things to see. And of course, probably if I worked in a hospital and I developed a number of babies, I'll probably be like, okay, I saw that just a minute ago. But it's not likely. So it's not until we have some of those miraculous things before we can start, place our belief in a certain way. But the point is, everything that Allah has created, if we practice mindfulness, and we travel the earth like Allah said we should, and we reflect, we will see some amazing things that Allah has put in place, that Allah has created. And they naturally, instinctively, by the way they created and designed, they bow to the oneness of Allah. They submit to Allah. I couldn't even begin to, count those number of things. And so if we talk about the whole idea of submitting, there's a verse of the Quran where Allah says that, do you not see that to Allah everything prostrates of the heavens and whatever is in the earth, and the sun and the moon and the stars and the mountains and the trees and the animals and many of mankind? And if we don't start to see that, to allow us to even understand what that means, because what I'm talking about for now is that innate nature that we carry within us. So it means that we're given this. We're already given it. We didn't bring it onto ourselves. There's that quality or those qualities that Allah has given us. Now, when we now want to talk about the whole idea of owning some of those things, and we know that Islam is not a foreign concept, it's not a new concept. It's the same thing that the first messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, brought up until the last messenger, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that is the oneness of Allah. What Islam does is that it comes to correct, to confirm, and to complete. That's what Islam. That's what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to do, and that's why he's described as the last prophet and the seal. That's the seal, that's the end. Nothing, no one, no message is coming after him. And so it's the same message that has run through. It's the same message of the oneness of Allah. It's the same belief that we're inclined towards. And if we have that, what does it now mean to become believers? What does it mean to own that belief and to be able to take it and say, this is Islam. This is Islam. This is a core message of Islam. It is to believe in the oneness of Allah and to believe that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of Allah. That's it. It's really, really simple. What people tend to do is we are given a whole range of beliefs about this religion that become extensions of culture, extensions of personal experiences, extensions of what is, promoted in the media, extensions of people's distorted and dysfunctional beliefs, extensions and expressions of all kinds of ways that people claim to be Muslim, but in actual fact, they may not be practicing Islam as they're supposed to, even though they claim to be Muslim. So let's bring it back to the topic again, as I've been trying to do. How do we own a belief that is already given to us? I think about it in 3 ways. I think about awareness, I think about acceptance, and I think about adherence. Now, awareness for me is in 3 parts. There's the awareness of Allah, and one of the most profound, most effective ways that we can think about that awareness of Allah is thinking about his names and attributes. One of the most powerful things. I write a lot, mashallah tabarakallah, and sometimes because I try to make my writing to be as inclusive as possible. And so sometimes when I might write about a concept that is, for example, I might be writing about, picking new shoes, something like that. Sounds like a mundane kind of simple thing, really. Okay, go to the shop, like those shoes, buy them, take them home, keep them under the bed, go next week, see another pair of shoes that are on sales, buy them again. Sounds simple. But sometimes I find myself wanting to talk about shoes and I get all philosophical and say, oh wow, you put the shoes on and you walk the paths on a journey. And when you're walking the paths on a journey, you meet people on that journey and the shoes speak to you like, okay, lady, what are you talking about here? But the reality is that I find myself wanting to then talk about the shoes, maybe how Allah has empowered me, how, Allah is the provider, and I want to talk about his names and attributes. Because for me, I will almost always find that there's some kind of natural progression, almost like a center that some of those thought processes arrive at. And the way you do that when you're talking about awareness of Allah is talking about his names and attributes. Isn't that amazing? That Allah, the exalted, is described as God, and he's a person with many names and attributes. And there's so much of that allows you to connect with him in the most, in the most amazing way, in the most wondrous way, in the most personal way, in a way that is relevant to each and everybody. So if I claim Allah as my Lord, you can claim Allah as your Lord. And the conversations that I'm having with Allah is going to be different from the conversations that you're having with Allah, because he's my Lord and he's your Lord. That is the power of Allah. And so what that gives you is a level of connectedness, a consciousness of his presence and his being in your life in a way that it makes you so in tune with him. So that's the first awareness I'm talking about. And there's so much more to that. The second awareness is ourselves. What is called marifatun nafs, which is knowing our soul, the knowledge of your person. This is a big one that I talk about often. There's nothing, most of the programs or talks or writings that I do, the baseline is self-knowledge, self-awareness. It's so, I cannot even begin to describe how central it is to any form of being or becoming. So when you talk about self-awareness, we're not just talking about look in the mirror, blow yourself a kiss, admire your look. When I was coming, one of my beautiful sisters said to me, oh, it looks like you lost some weight. I said, really? Oh, I like that. And sometimes I just wear big pants just to tell myself that I've lost some weight. But really, for me, it's more than that. It's more than looking at that. It's me having such a sense of myself, and it's continuous, by the way. It's me having such a sense of myself that if somebody is trying to describe me to me, that might be new information, like what's happening to you, Rachel. Might be new information, but I might say, oh, wow, okay. And because you're doing that journeying of self-awareness, you might find, I've never thought about myself this way, but I'm going to go think. I'm going to go check it out. And when you start to do that, you might then start saying, oh, that's true, actually. When I went into the last Melbourne Muslima program, I wasn't so comfortable with speaking, but when I was speaking to, Sonia, I found out that I felt confident. So what that person said about you has an element of truth in it. But because you're now finding out, you might say, oh, okay, maybe I'm not comfortable talking to a large audience, but I'm comfortable and confident when I'm talking to someone one-on-one. And so if someone were now to come to you and say, how about you run the whole program? Say, I can't do that. So, but I saw you talking to people. You sounded, yeah, I'm talking to people because I feel more comfortable when I'm talking one-on-one. That is self-knowledge. And so how you will use that is that when somebody now brings something to you that is not true, you're likely to say, okay, I'll put it under consideration. That doesn't mean you're going to accept it, because oftentimes people project onto you things about themselves, sometimes insecurities, sometimes what is present for them, sometimes things they themselves are incapable of doing. They just say to you, oh, my goodness, you're just not a very confident person. Really? Okay, that's fine. So what self-awareness does for you in this conversation of owning your Islam is that it allows you to begin to have a sense of who you are and some of your own capacities, some of the qualities you are. Notice the words there, owning your Islam. So it is yours, okay? That might sound like, oh, that's rather possessive. But really, if we look at how Allah has created us into nations and tribes, into many different races, and if we look at all the pillars of Islam and how Islam gives us the 5 pillars that almost always brings us to the unity in diversity. The one that we do by ourselves is the Shahada. That one is single. But look at every other thing. The Salah we do. You line up, and it's meant to erase the inequality in that moment. You're meant to stand before your Lord in your essence, regardless of whether this person is tall or short or fat or black or white. This person is standing before their Lord, and they're doing it in unison with other people. If you talk about Ramadan as well, this is something we're doing at about the same time. Of course, we know that some people might fill their homes with, buffet type iftars, and some people barely have water to even break their fast. But for those number of hours that we have to deprive ourselves of food, we are also sort of on that same plane. If we look at the zakah as well, that is what is geared towards. And of course, we look at Hajj. That's a very, very humbling experience, I have to tell you. I remember when I went for Hajj and we were doing the tawaf. This is many, many years ago. And a tall woman, there was someone taller than me, beat me on the shoulder. It was so painful. Tears just popped into my eyes, like, oh my God. And the people that were in the same group, there was an older sister who was with us. And I said to her, with tears in my eyes, do you know what just happened to me? She said, what? I said, this woman just beat me. And by the way, the woman beat me, and I looked at her, and she just looked back at me like, what are you going to do about it? And the older sister said, just give her a slap. I said, I can't. I'm doing Hajj. If I slapped her, it would invalidate my Hajj. So I had to suck it up and rub my shoulder and try to move away. But I didn't do much.
What did she break you with?
Her teeth.
Oh, she beat you?
Yes. With her teeth.
Baby.
Yeah, I know. It was the strangest thing. I don't know what was going on with her.
Wow.
I know.
It is very strange, like biting you literally.
That's what she did.
It's like a 3-year-old child biting.
Yeah. It was the strangest thing. On my shoulder. It was so painful, and it was one of those times that the tawaf was so packed that there would be times that we were literally at a standstill, and people would just be shouting Allahu Akbar, just to move, like we couldn't move. So there was nowhere to go. And there was another person too who was doing funny things behind me, who was a man, and I'm not going to describe the funny things again.
So you mean that Hajj is like you can get anything, like, so just go with a big heart.
Well, I don't know who is watching this video. I don't want people to think, oh, she's talking about being beaten on the shoulder and some man following her. What is this Hajj all about?
But there are risks, so you have to go with a big heart, tolerance.
But I'm telling you, the reason that, I mean, you can see that I'm clearly traumatized by it. I'm still talking about like 20 years after. But the point is, even at that moment, of course, I didn't feel any kind of kindness towards the person who just beat me on the shoulder. It wasn't about that. But I couldn't heed her. I couldn't do anything. Because if everyone responded to the stress of Hajj, the way the stress was, we couldn't possibly have that. So so much to unpack from it. So what I'm saying to us in effect is every single person here is made differently. So if you're talking about owning your Islam, you got to have a deep awareness of Allah. You got to have a deep awareness of who you are as a person. And the third part of that awareness is to have a deep awareness of the world. Now, I talked a little bit about this at some point earlier, where I was talking about looking at creation. It's one of the most, if you talk about wanting to keep faith alive, if you want those moments, as Professor Islam will go to Mount Hira and he would be in reflection. I cannot emphasize it enough. I don't do enough of it myself, but I do what I call pocket holidays because I have a very, very busy schedule. And sometimes it's very easy to get into that spin of life's business. You go from home, you go to work, you attend to the family. If you have a business, you have deadlines. If you have a program that you're contributing to, you've got things that you got to do. If you are someone who just has some goals that they've put in place, they've got to do all those things before you realize it. One day turns into 5 days and 5 days turns into 2 weeks. And before you realize 6 months are gone. And if you had to go back to over those 6 months, you just think to yourself, what have I done in 6 months? So one very, very important thing, if you're talking about awareness of the world, you can't be aware of the world when you're absent from it. And the way to be present in the world is even when you're eating, which is a form of mindfulness, is to be present for that food. When you're going around, how many people will say that they've passed a certain road or route like 5 years of their life, and if you've asked them, can you describe to me 3 places you will see every time you pass that place, they can't even think about it? How many people experience that? Because I can see, it's normal, especially if it's somewhere you pass every day. And some people will tell you that they meet the same person at the train station, the same train station, at the same time, on the same train, and they've been doing that for the past 10 years. Really. And if you ask them, maybe do you notice maybe the bag they take? What they might look like, say, and that's it. So mindfulness that we're talking about allows us to not only be present, it allows us to participate. It allows us to also be able to appreciate, and that also brings us to that place where we're connecting. Remember, what we're talking about is owning our Islam, and we're talking about how to make the belief that we have move from the belief to becoming believers. Move from what we're given to be able to own what we're given. So the first thing that I've talked about is what? Who remembers? Awareness. And the first awareness that I talked about is what? About Allah. Now, I know that I don't have the gold stars here to hand out to people, But I really would love, and I see that everyone is attentive as far as I can tell. I can even see some beautiful young faces just really paying attention. I'm talking about you. Yeah? Let me blow you a kiss. So, but I do want you to just be as attentive as possible, and I know you are. Now, the second awareness we talked about is what? No, awareness. The second awareness of ourselves, exactly. And the third one is what? Of the world. So I would definitely encourage you, if you have a place that you can go every now and again, take walks, go to your garden, feel your hands on the flowers, smell it. When you're cooking, I know that cooking, you smell a lot of the food. But something you can play around with is when you're cooking, you can try to discern the smells of particular spices in your food. See if you can connect the name of the spice, because some of us are so used to using those things, we just chop, and that's it, the food is ready. But when you're practicing mindfulness, it's a presence of mind. So this is really important. The second part is acceptance. Now, acceptance is an ongoing task, and it's one of the most difficult things to do, because again, when we're talking about owning something, remember the analogy we used? Someone gives you a bag, and the bag is not yours, but it's been with you for so long. Maybe you decide to use it, but somehow you're not quite sure of how to take the bag because you've not brought yourself to accept it in that way. So you kind of use it, sneak around with it, be unsure about it. Now, when you're talking about owning your Islam, and I talk about, I've given you the bag, and it's a beautiful bag, and it's got lots of beautiful things in it. You've become aware of it. You know what's inside. You are mindful of what's inside. In order for you to accept that thing, you're doing the awareness, but in order for you to accept it, you've got to put it into some kind of what? You've got to put it in some kind of use. So one thing that I often talk about is the points that we get to, that we become reverts. And I'm not in any way minimizing or trying to compare what some of our amazing human beings go through to leave everything that is familiar to them, to lose family and friends and familiarity with culture and everything that they know, to take on a completely new way of thinking and life. I couldn't even imagine it, to be honest. But the point that I'm trying to make here is some of us are born into Islam. And we know I was born into Islam. And I've always known that I never wanted to subscribe to any faith except Islam. I wasn't confused in any way. And yet when I was in the university and I had my own share of exploration, let me just put it delicately that way. So, but when I got into my third year, so this is in Nigeria, where I'm from, and I met a group of people that I became friends with, and they were of a different faith, not just some faith. And I got interested in some of their books. So I'd read the books, and this is a big story, by the way. So I'm giving a sneak peek about my book, my next book, just so you know. But anyway, I'd read their books, and what was quite interesting about it is that the books were very emotive, very beautiful, talks about you connecting with God. They would talk about how God is like the sun and we are like the rays of the sun, and all kinds of things. Don't ask. It was very interesting, but anyway. So, but the interesting thing was that the more I read those books, the more I felt my heart inclining towards Allah. I couldn't understand it. I would read their books, and then the more I resisted certain suggestions that they had. So they talk about abstinence from certain worldly things. They talk about things that, you needed to just deny and deprive yourself of and all of that. And that was appealing because I was kind of in that stage where I do believe that my soul was open and it was yearning. And so what was coming to me is like a thirsty soul that was being given sprinkles of water. So I was kind of wanting that. And then So again, this is a very personal story, but anyway, I'll share it. And so one day, and the more I read the book, the more I wanted to explore more of what the Quran was about. And so, remember one day I took the Quran and I just opened it, and it was a verse of the light, verse of the Nur, where Allah is talking about Allah's light being in a lamp, and it was comparing it to that. And something just happened to me on that day, and anyway, I found that I had gotten to a point where it's not that I had rejected Islam up until that point, but for me it was a point of acceptance. It was when I knew that I've always been Muslim, but it was my point of accepting Islam. That was it for me. And there's so much more to that story. But the reason I'm sharing this story is because I know that there are some of our sisters here who are reverts. And so people always get so intrigued and so fascinated by, oh my God, she's a revert. And sometimes they want to touch you and touch your hair and all of those things, and want to take you home and all of that. And the sad thing though is after the initial fascination is the silence that comes afterwards, which is very sad, and a whole range of issues. But for the person who was born Muslim, it's possible to take Islam for granted. It's possible to just assume. And sometimes, and oftentimes, not only do we take Islam for granted, we can be very myopic in the way we see the world. We can be very closed-minded about how we see the world. We can be very typical about how we are in the world. But a person who is coming into Islam from a completely different background, they're likely to be full of wonder, and they're intrigued about Islam, and they want to know, and they're keen, until they meet a jaded Muslim who's just like, oh, and a revert sister is saying, oh my God, subhanallah, the day I took my shahada, I just want to connect with Allah. I said, yeah. And the person who's Muslim just say, yeah, okay. Nothing spectacular. It's just nothing to see here. Just keep moving. And so what happens is, after a while, the person who's just coming starts to wonder, I'm not sure this is what I was expecting. And it's possible that some of you would know what I'm talking about, because I don't mean to speak for you or anything. This is what I've observed and has been shared with me. And so there's a level of acceptance that has to happen if we're talking about owning our Islam. And there's a couple of things that I also thought I'd share when I found some verses of the Quran. So the acceptance that we're talking about in three ways. We're talking about the acceptance of our person, which has to come from that awareness we're talking about. We're talking about the acceptance of our position. So Allah has created us as vicegerents in the world. What does that mean? What does that mean to be the Khalifa of Allah? Subhanallah. What does it mean? What is that role? And to accept it, if I say to you, tell me your name, sister. Emma? Amina. If I say Amina, and I called you here, we do all the ceremony, and I say, I, Summayyah, hereby bestows unto you my phone. Do you, Amina, accept my phone?
Yeah.
You mean after all my theatrics, that's all you could give me? And then you accept the phone. What it means is I might say, do you accept the phone to care for that phone while I'm not around? What does it mean? It means that I've put my phone in your care. It means that you have to look after it, maybe take some calls for me, make sure that whatever pictures you take with it, it's all right. All of those things, you do those things. You've accepted that role of custodian of my phone. So when we accept our position as vicegerent, when we accept the belief that Allah has given us, then we're able to own it and become believers in the way that we follow, which is the third part of what I'm going to talk about. But I do want to talk about that acceptance a bit more. Acceptance of a position is also tied to acceptance of our purpose on earth. Because yes, we're told we've been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to worship him. And that's it. There's nothing confusing about that. But what does that look like? How do we worship Allah? How do we serve him? How do we make something that seems like such a very broad mandate? How do we make it our own? What does it mean? So we accept the person that Allah has made us into. We accept our position, and we accept our purpose. The third and one of the most important parts of this is adherence. And that seems simple enough because we're talking about actions. We're talking about following. We're talking about doing what we need to do. So this is a part that you now say, okay, we've talked about some ideas and concepts that make us think about the belief, makes us think about how we can aspire to be believers. Now, how do we express it? How do we put it into action? What does that look like? For me, for you, tell me your name, sister.
Elise.
E-L-I-S-E?
E-L-I-Z.
Z-E, Elise. Okay. I like your name, by the way. It's beautiful. So, how Elise is, in the way you put into action, you adhere, how I am is going to be different. And that's one of the most beautiful things about Islam. It's such a generous, such a religion that fits with our nature, that it allows every one of us to own it in the way that we can. So if I'm able to use hijab, you might not be able to use hijab. But perhaps while I'm snoring my head off during the night, you might be able to get up and pray in the night. And yet, what are we both looking for? Perhaps we're both looking for the pleasure of Allah. If I'm able to fast Mondays and Thursdays, which I'm not, by the way, but anyway, if I'm able to do that, perhaps you're able to make sure that when you do your salah, you're very intentional about it, which is what everyone should strive for, but it doesn't mean everyone has capacity for it. These are the ways that we own our Islam. Now, I want to expand more a little bit about that as I finish the talk. When you talk about owning Islam, and I think this also forms part of that core, again, remember that Allah has created us into nations and tribes. We have some things that there's nothing confusing about in terms of what Islam asks of us, in how we worship. But what Islam also gives us is that if it's not something that your culture is against, if it's not going against the tenets of Islam, it's all right. And so what the allowance it gives us is that we can own our Islam in our dress. We can own our Islam in the way we speak. We can own our Islam in the work ethics that we show at work. We can own our Islam in the way we study. We can own our Islam in our business practices. We can own our Islam in the way we raise our children, in the way that we participate in the school parent-teachers interview. We can own our Islam when we choose not to park our cars blocking the road. We can own our Islam when we try to be civil, even somebody is being very nasty to us. And I'm not asking us to be angels, far from it. What I'm saying to us is that we can take advantage of the uniqueness of every single person that Allah has created and the diversity of who we are as people, as well as our cultures, as well as our skills and experiences. And we can use this to make Islam our own, to own the Islam. Now, if we go back to that analogy of the bag, if you're ashamed of something, you're either hiding it or keeping it somewhere. That means you're not aware of what it has for you, you haven't accepted what is meant to give you, and you're certainly not using it the way you're meant to be using it. And there are ways that we identify as Muslims. Some important questions that we need to be asking ourselves is, who do we identify as? Do we identify with Islam based on some of these things that I've mentioned before, with awareness, with acceptance, with adherence? Or do we allow people to identify us and we identify with the way they identify us? So if somebody decides today and says, so for me, I'm Muslim, I'm woman, I'm black, and I'm a very tall person. Mashallah, tabarakallah. And so when there's somebody in the aisle, the other day I was in the aisle and somebody's looking at something and I move close to her and she's like, okay. Now I tend not to overthink those kind of experiences because it could be a number of things. Maybe I just startled her. Maybe because I'm tall and black, I startled her. Maybe because I'm tall and black and woman and Muslim, I startled her. I'm not going to use my brain power to try and analyze that. It's not important. What's important is, and I'm not going to go out of my way to make her feel better about her being startled. I hope she's all right. Oh, I really do hope she's all right. You don't believe me? I do hope she's all right. I do hope she's all right, seriously. And, you know, I just look at her. She looks at me. She gives me a nervous smile and quickly leaves the place. I don't know what's going on with her. But for me in that moment, I'm not going to accept whatever might be going on for her. If she thought that she was scared because I'm tall, well, I hope she feels better about all tall people. If she's scared because I'm black, I'm not going to be thinking about that. If she's scared because I'm Muslim, I'm not going to identify with that. Now, if it was in the night and I come out of the dark as a tall black woman, not the Muslim part, just a tall black woman in the night, and I woke up to her and she wasn't expecting it, I'd probably be scared of myself too. So that makes sense. That's logical. But I'm not going to identify with some names or labels that some people are calling me. And out of nervousness, maybe I'm meant to give a talk somewhere, and the first thing I say to myself is that, oh, you might be scared because I'm Muslim. Why would I say that? I'm never going to say that. Because when I do that, what I'm basically doing is that I am identifying with a perception of me. That is not true. So what I'm saying is that how do you own your Islam? There's a whole range of ways. But the first thing is that you got to practice awareness, because when you know some of those things, there are things you're never going to accept about yourself. You're not going to allow people to call you funny names. Like, I'm not going to allow someone to make fun of my name. I said, what did you say your name was? Sumi, Suma, Somo, Momo. What? No, that's not my name. I can take time. Maybe you don't know, maybe the vowels is difficult for you. That's okay. But what I'm saying is that because I know some of who I am, I'm not going to accept the version that you want to feed back to me. So you see how they link up? The awareness, the acceptance, and the adherence. And what adherence also gives you is that take the portion. There's a hadith of Prophet Salam where he's talking to someone and he says, Allah loves the act that is done constantly. So if Allah loves an act that is done constantly, if that act is something like, I'm going out of my house and I've made that intention that I don't want to be wasteful, and I put off the light. It may not seem like a direct act of worship, but because in my mind I've thought, I'm not going to be wasteful, maybe Allah will take it as an act of worship. Because there are things we do that we're not going to say, oh Allah, by the way, I'm making the intention to be good today, so I'm going to put off all the light. That's not typically how we think. But because there's some core intention there, that becomes a baseline of some of what we do. So I'm going to finish up the talk here. And I'm praying and hoping and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us find more of who we are. I'm asking Allah in His mercy and wisdom and guidance to help us face who we are. There's a dua that Prophet Islam has taught us when we look in the mirror. Oh Allah, as you've made my form, make my character beautiful. And so what that dua teaches us is that Allah has made us, has fashioned us into the most beautiful forms we can have. And the form that He's given me might be different from the form He has given you. But what He has given every single one of us is the capacity to build that form and to grow it and to become better and better at it. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes today a witness for us, for me and you, and not against us on the day of judgment. I ask Allah in His infinite mercy that, by the time we start to find out about more of who we are, Allah allows us to make a difference in the world with who we are. And nothing is too small if that's our goal. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you for listening.